I want you to picture the Grateful Dead for a second. Like, just close your eyes and let the image form.
Oh, I'm guessing tie-dye. Lots of tie-dye.
Right, exactly. You're probably picturing a sea of tie-dye, these epic, swirling, psychedelic guitar solos, and just a sort of endless counterculture acid trip.
Yeah, all being steered by the benevolent, bearded presence of Jerry Garcia. That's the classic image.
That is the mythos, yeah.
Yeah.
That is the cultural shorthand we all have for this band. But what if I told you that the person who actually started the Grateful Dead, the guy who gave them their initial sound, their swagger, their literal reason to exist, was a strict blues purist who absolutely refused to take LSD?
I mean, it shatters the mythology entirely, you know?
It really does.
It changes the whole origin story from this tale of spontaneous psychedelic enlightenment to something much more grounded and, frankly, much more tragic.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a truly fascinating video transcript from the Shakedown archives. It's titled, Pigpen Started the Grateful Dead. LSD Ended That.
Yeah, and our mission today is to explore this hidden chemical fault line that fractured a legendary band. We're looking at the unseen human cost of collective groupthink.
Which is such a wild concept.
Right. We are going to explore a profound paradox, how a drug that was famously supposed to expand consciousness actually built a highly exclusive private club that locked a founding member out of his own creation.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Okay.
because before we can understand how Ron Pigpen McKernan was pushed out, we really have to establish why the band wouldn't have even existed without him in the first place.
Oh, totally.
We have to rewind to late 1964. So Pigpen is not some rock star at this point. He's working as a janitor at Dana Morgan's music store in Palo Alto.
Just a local music shop, yeah.
Right. And after hours, when the shop closes, he's taking instruments off the wall, guitars, this little organ, and he is relentlessly pitching Jerry Garcia on an idea.
Because Pigpen sees what the Rolling Stones are doing over in the UK, right? He sees them tearing through America, playing electric versions of Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. And he turns to Garcia and says, essentially, half the stuff we are already doing in our acoustic jug band, we could just do electric tomorrow.
You just wanted to plug in.
Exactly. He wanted to play the blues, just louder and heavier.
Wait, so for those of us who aren't, music historians, when the transcript mentions he loved the Chess Records catalog, what exactly does that mean? Like, in terms of the sound he wanted to build?
So Chess Records was basically the epicenter of electric Chicago blues.
Okay.
Think gritty, distorted, repetitive, driving rhythms that are designed to get people drinking and dancing in sweaty, packed clubs.
Oh, so it's not a sit-down concert vibe.
No, it's not polite music at all. It's raw.
Pigpen wanted that visceral crowd-moving energy.
And Garcia agrees to this pivot, which means the Warlocks, which was their original name before they became the Grateful Dead, they were not born from Garcia's grand musical vision.
Nope, not at all.
They weren't born from an acid-drenched revelation in the woods. They were willed into existence by a janitor in a music store who wanted to play Chicago blues. And that distinction is just so crucial to keep in mind as we move forward. The Grateful Dead didn't become the Grateful Dead by evolving naturally from what Pigpen built.
Right.
They became the Grateful Dead by replacing it. But in those early days, he was the absolute core.
Oh, completely.
Just look at their first public show, May 5th, 1965, at Magoo's Pizza Parlor in Menlo Park.
A pizza parlor?
Yeah, literally playing a pizza parlor. They start with a handful of friends on a Wednesday night. A week later, 300 or 400 kids are packing the place.
Which is insane growth. Garcia himself described it like a bomb going off. People were just freaking out.
Yeah.
But Garcia openly admitted that he was not the one selling the band to that room. Garcia said, point blank, that Pigpen was the only guy in the band who had any talent when they were starting out.
Yeah, Garcia actually said Bob Weir was almost completely space, just barely there as a rhythm player.
Wow.
And Garcia described himself as aggressively crazy, like he could talk to anyone, but he wasn't what made the band work on stage.
Pigpen was the frontman.
Exactly. When Phil Lesh first came to see them on May 27th, and Lesh was actually on acid at the time, by the way, he said, Pigpen ate my mind with the harp singing the blues.
That's a great quote.
The pizza parlor management actually told Lesh to stop dancing, but he couldn't help it. That was the magnetic effect Pigpen had on a room.
It really reminds me of a modern startup dynamic,
Oh, how so?
Like Pigpen is the charismatic founder who wills a company into existence through sheer force of personality and hustle. He's out there selling the product, making the connections, carrying the pitch meetings, while the tech guys, Garcia and Weir, are still just sort of tinkering awkwardly in the garage.
That is a perfect analogy, and if you look at their early gigs, those garage tinkers couldn't sell a product to save their lives without him.
Seriously.
Think about their residency at the Inner Room in Belmont. This was the divorcee pickup joint. 6 nights a week, 5 50-minute sets a night.
That is a grueling schedule.
It is. By the 5th set, the band would be so high and playing so loud, Garcia said they were barbaric and literally drove the regular clientele out of the bar holding their ears.
Which is hilarious. But then you contrast that with their gig at Frenchie's Bikini A-Go-Go in Hayward.
Oh!
They march through their limited repertoire to a crowd of like 3 people. They come back the next night, and management has replaced them with an elderly trio playing clarinet, upright bass, and accordion.
Replaced by an accordion,
Love.
which just proves the reality of their situation. Without Pigpen carrying the room with his dirty blues and his R&B frontman persona, they couldn't even hold a crowd of 3.
Yeah.
Blair Jackson, who's a prominent chronicler of the band, put it plainly. He said in 1966, Pigpen, not Garcia, was viewed as the leader of the band by most people. If it weren't for him, they would have just starved in a rehearsal room.
So we have this tight-knit unit. They're grinding out gigs. They have a clear frontman who's making them successful enough to actually build a following. But because they build that following, they start attracting a scene.
Yeah.
And that scene brings Ken Kesey's acid tests.
The acid tests. They changed the entire trajectory of the band, and this is where that concept of the private vocabulary begins to form.
Let's pause and actually explain what these acid tests were, though, because the transcript treats them as this massive turning point. What was physically happening in these rooms?
Right, so Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters were hosting these massive, chaotic communal parties where LSD, which was still legal at the time, remember, was just distributed in the punch.
Oh, wow. Legal acid in the punch.
Yeah, but it wasn't just a party. It was an environment of absolute sensory overload. You had strobe lights flashing, movie projectors playing random films on the walls, tape loops echoing bizarre sounds everywhere.
And the Grateful Dead were effectively the house band for this madness.
Exactly.
So they aren't playing a normal concert where they play a 3-minute song, the crowd claps, and they play the next one.
Far from it. The music had to adapt to the chaos. I mean, when everyone in the room, including the band, is experiencing the time dilation and psychological unraveling of an acid trip, a standard Chicago blues progression just doesn't make sense anymore.
Right. You can't just play Muddy Waters while the walls are melting.
Right. So the band started playing these long, formless, improvisational jams because they were literally soundtracking a collective chemical experience.
Which brings us to the tectonic shift.
Yeah.
And the shift really crystallizes at Camp Lagunitas, which was their rural retreat where they all lived and rehearsed together.
Yeah.
Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer, has this striking memory from that time.
Yeah.
He said nobody in the band drank except Pigpen.
Yeah.
The rest of the band, in his words, just smoked pot and ate acid.
A total literal divide in consumption. I mean, Pigpen is sitting alone in his room with a bottle of wine playing Lightnin' Hopkins records, while the rest of the band is having this profound psychedelic communion right out in the living room.
See, I have to push back on the band's logic here. Why couldn't they just be a band with different hobbies off stage? Like, does a shared creative vision actually require a shared chemical experience?
What's fascinating here is that in this specific microculture, yes, it absolutely did. LSD wasn't just a recreational drug for them. It functioned as a sociological tool.
Oh, interesting.
It built a completely private vocabulary. When you experience ego death and sensory synthesis with a group of people, you develop shared reference points that are physically impossible to articulate to an outsider. If you haven't taken the drug, you cannot speak the language.
Wow. It's like everyone at your company goes to a retreat, invents a completely new language over the weekend, and when you show up on Monday, all the important company decisions are being made in that language, and you aren't allowed a dictionary.
That is exactly it. And we see the immediate cruelty of that dynamic. Rock Scully, the band's manager, said that because Pigpen never accepted LSD, he wasn't part of that new consciousness. The rest of the band would sit around talking about Pigpen's future, saying things like, what are we going to do with him? Let's make him play quietly here. And they were having these conversations without him even in the room.
That's awful. They're discussing the future of the founder of the band behind his back because he isn't on their chemical wavelength.
Scully observed that the shift became obvious to the band long before it became obvious to Pigpen. Scully said he just felt bad and didn't know why.
Man.
That is the human cost of this specific type of innovation. Pigpen could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet, but no one told him the earthquake was chemical.
Right.
He didn't refuse to evolve musically, he simply refused a drug. But refusing the drug meant he was locked out of the boardroom.
Because that chemical divide dictated the social dynamic, and then it inevitably started dictating the musical direction.
Yes, exactly.
We move into 1967 and 1968, and Garcia and Lesh are pushing far, far away from the dirty blues. They're getting into North Indian classical rhythms, tonal experiments, 11-beat time signatures.
Super complex stuff.
Weir described their rehearsals as heavy mental stuff, very precise and highly structured.
And you can see the friction instantly with Pigpen's instrument. Pigpen played a farfisa organ.
Wait, what exactly does a farfisa organ sound like, and why couldn't he just play it differently to match an 11-beat rhythm?
Oh, so the farfisa has a very sharp, punchy, reedy sound. It's the classic 1960s garage rock organ sound. Think of the song 96 Tears.
Okay, yeah, I know that song.
It's brilliant for driving a blues beat, but physically, the instrument cannot produce the fluid, spacey, atmospheric swells needed for a sprawling 30-minute psychedelic jam. It just pierces right through the atmosphere they were trying to build.
Oh, I see. So because they couldn't communicate off stage, the musical communication on stage completely breaks down.
Totally.
Garcia and Lesh want to explore the cosmos. Pigpen wants to stay in the Chicago blues clubs. And because Garcia and Lesh are driving the bus now, Pigpen's foundational sound suddenly becomes a liability. Which brings us to a really painful chapter. Because the popular narrative for a long time was simply, well, Pigpen just couldn't keep up.
Right, but the transcript points out that this narrative is a very convenient cover. In September 1968, Garcia and Lesh actually tried to fire Pigpen. And not just Pigpen, they tried to fire Bob Weir, too.
Wait, they tried to fire Weir, the guy who becomes one of the most famous rhythm guitarists in rock history.
Yeah. Garcia put the job of firing them on Rock Scully. Scully didn't want to do it. Kreutzmann later claimed in his memoir he wanted no part of it. But the firing ultimately didn't stick. Mainly because Pigpen and Weir just kept coming back to the gigs.
Wait, how does someone just keep coming back after being fired? That makes no sense.
Well, you have to look at the psychological makeup of the Grateful Dead. They operated as a conflict-avoidant, passive-aggressive hippie family. There was no rigid corporate hierarchy, no HR department, no security guards to escort you from the building. So Pigpen and Weir just showed up, plugged their instruments in, and the others were simply too conflict-avoidant to physically stop them from playing.
That is incredible. They just stubbornly played through their own firing.
Pretty much.
But the rest of the band didn't stop trying to replace them. The transcript mentions these secret auditions.
Oh, yeah.
The remaining members, Garcia, Lesh, Kreutzmann, and Mickey Hart, would play these jam sessions at the Matrix Club in San Francisco. They called themselves Mickey and the Heartbeats.
Right.
But they were inviting guys like Elvin Bishop and Paul Butterfield to sit in. Officially, it's just a jam. In reality, they were actively auditioning for a version of the Grateful Dead that didn't include their founder.
And when the soft firing didn't work, we get to the real displacement. November 23rd, 1968. Memorial Auditorium in Athens, Ohio.
What happens?
The band brings in Tom Constantin, TC. He's an avant-garde music student, a friend of Phil Lesh from UC Berkeley, who studied with the experimental composer Karlheinz Stockhausen.
Okay, serious pedigree.
Yeah, but TC had literally never played rock and roll in his life. But he takes over the keyboards.
This perfectly illustrates your point about the private vocabulary. They brought in a guy who didn't even play rock music, simply because he spoke the new avant-garde language they were obsessed with.
Exactly.
Fluency in the group's new culture became more important than fluency in actually entertaining a crowd.
Yeah.
So what do they give Pigpen? They strip him of his keyboards and they hand him a pair of congas, just to keep his hands busy.
Just brutal. John McIntyre, their road manager, watched this happen up close. He said it was incredibly humiliating for Pigpen. He was deeply hurt, but he couldn't show it. He couldn't talk about it.
That's heartbreaking.
McIntyre wondered if Pigpen even admitted the humiliation to himself, except maybe when he turned to the bottle.
It's just devastating. The guy famous for these legendary 20-minute improvised vocal raps, working crowds into an absolute frenzy silence.
Yeah.
By late 1968, they record their third album, Oxymoxoa. This album plunges them $180,000 in debt to Warner Bros. Because they spend months experimenting in the studio.
So much money.
Pigpen is practically a ghost on it. Constantin is playing the keyboards. Pigpen is credited on the sleeve, but musically, on the album that defined their experimental era, the founder is invisible.
And this creates a profound, almost absurd dynamic when they play live. Dennis McNally, the band's official historian, described it as two bands sharing one stage.
How so?
The contrast is jarring. You have an elite jazz fusion ensemble essentially speaking a complex mathematical language on stage, building these intricate sonic architectures that only they understand for 30 or 40 minutes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So they sideline him, they give him congas, they barely put him on the album. But look at their live set lists from this era.
It's wild.
After 30 minutes of deep, avant-garde mathematical space jazz, the math class ends. And who walks out to close the show? It's Pigpen.
Yeah.
Mr. Funk himself steps up to the mic, does a 20-minute rap on the song Love Light, tells dirty jokes, and sells the Brooklyn Bridge to some guy in the audience.
It reveals the core irony of their entire strategy. The acid-driven experimental music they were making was undeniably brilliant. The album Live Dead captures it perfectly. But that experimental jazz fusion could not reliably hold a room of 1,500 sweaty kids who paid money to dance.
Yeah, it's just too out there, too weird to guarantee a reaction.
Exactly. The band had built this elaborate avant-garde cathedral, but they built it directly on top of Pigpen. They desperately needed his foundational frontman skills, his raw earthly emotion, to actually give the crowd what they came for and send them home happy.
Right.
They marginalized him, but they absolutely still depended on him to be the anchor.
They wanted the freedom to explore the cosmos, but they needed his gravity so they wouldn't just float away and lose the audience entirely.
That's a great way to put it.
Which makes the final chapter of this story so incredibly frustrating. Because the ultimate tragedy isn't just that Pigpen was sidelined. It's that years later, the architects of that displacement looked back and realized they were wrong.
The vindication comes far, far too late. Decades later, Jerry Garcia made a stunning confession. He admitted that the narrative of Pigpen couldn't keep up was false.
Really?
Yeah. Garcia said Pigpen was innately musical. He absolutely had the ability to deal with the complex chord changes. The problem wasn't Pigpen's lack of ability. The problem, according to Garcia, was that the band was off on a false note.
Garcia literally said they were doing music that was self-consciously weird. And he admitted that if they had just paid more attention to Pigpen, it probably would have saved us a couple of years of fooling around. He used stronger language, but you get the idea.
Right, and Bob Weir agreed. Weir looked back at that wildly complicated era and said the complex music didn't come off more often than not. It was usually just a nice try, guys.
Hearing that, does it change anything? It sounds almost like a billionaire having buyer's remorse after bulldozing a historic house to build some weird, unlivable modern mansion.
I mean, it is more than just buyer's remorse. It is a raw confession about the blinding nature of collective groupthink. The shared chemical experience of LSD made them so certain of their path, so convinced of their avant-garde brilliance, that they couldn't see the value of their own foundation until it was gone. The masterpieces survived. The music of that era is legendary, but Pigpen didn't survive.
Alcohol is what ultimately killed Ron McKernan. But as the transcript points out, LSD is what displaced him. It built a new Grateful Dead inside the one he started.
And he never got to hear Garcia's apology.
Never. He spent his final days in the band playing those congas on the side of the stage, watching a stranger play keyboards, completely locked out of the shared language and the shared future of his own creation.
It perfectly illustrates the heavy cost of innovation. In groups, especially creative ones, driven by a shared intense experience, whether it's a drug, a philosophy, or a new technology, often discard their most stabilizing forces in the blind pursuit of the experimental.
Yeah.
They mistake the foundation for an obstacle.
So what does this all mean? We started by looking at a janitor with a vision, a guy who willed a legendary band into existence, only to be chemically and musically exiled by his own creation.
Yeah.
And I think there is a profound takeaway here that goes way beyond music history. I want you listening right now to reflect on your own life, your own career, your own social circles. Have you ever been part of an in-group at work, in a creative project, in a friend group that developed a private vocabulary? And did that group leave someone behind simply because they didn't speak the new language?
It happens more often than we'd like to admit. When a group achieves something historic, or even just successful, we usually credit their shared vision, we praise the people who push the boundaries.
Right.
But maybe we need to look closer at the edges of the room. Maybe we need to look at the silent, marginalized voices, the ones quietly holding the congas. We have to ask ourselves, what foundational greatness was lost simply because the group decided someone no longer spoke their language?
Please click like and then subscribe. Also share this video with your friends. Thank you.